distinguished guests, scholars and students, it is a pleasure to be speaking to you today at the Arab Conference at Harvard. Sadly, I am unable to make it in person. I haven't returned to the US since the Trump administration shattered the Palestinian mission in 2018 when I was serving as ambassador in the US. I am honored to be addressing you at what is a defining moment in the history of Palestine, our region and the world. Allow me, please, to thank Jamal Nimr, Hashim Abdu and their team here at the ACH for preparing and organizing this conference. I spent a couple of years at Harvard as a visiting scholar. I greatly miss Cambridge and Boston and my walks around the Harvard Square and along the Charles River. Above all, I do miss my friends, both faculty and students. My road to Harvard started in a refugee camp in Rafah in southern Gaza. You will be all too familiar with Rafah today, home now to 1.5 million Palestinians forcibly displaced from areas of Gaza, now largely laid to waste by Israel's genocidal aggression. My education started in an UNRWA school, as it does for most Palestinian refugees who are all raised on the mantra of education, education, education. It is this mantra that has ensured that Palestinians enjoy one of the highest literacy rates in the world and one of the highest per capita rates of PhD holders. This is why Israel's aggression has openly targeted Gaza's education sector, the most crucial to any society's development, viability, and prosperity. Scholars are now speaking of an edocide. 94 university professors have been killed so far, among them Professor Rifat El-Arair, a professor of English literature and a poet whose poem, If I Must Die, foretold his own killing. Every single one of Gaza's 12 universities have been destroyed in whole or in part. More than 75% of Gaza's school buildings have been partially damaged or totally destroyed. 625,000 school children have gone without an education for the past 6 months. At the same time, Israel has been deliberately targeting the Gaza's healthcare sector. Just 10 of Gaza's 36 hospitals remain partially functioning. Israel has killed nearly 500 healthcare professionals over the past 6 months, more than in all other conflicts combined in the period 21-22. Some say it will take 10 to 20 years to recover from this. And any recovery demands massive assistance that can best be facilitated by UNRWA, the biggest provider of education and health services to Palestinian refugees. The same UNRWA that, based merely on unsubstantiated allegations, the US has now stopped funding to appease Israel. We are looking at a lost generation, my friends, for whom a decent education will be a distant dream. This is deliberate. An occupied people is much easier to dominate if it is also uneducated, sick, and unaware of its rights. Israel is engaged in the wholesale erasure of an entire society. So, my friends, despite decades of talk about a two-state solution, one that the US officials still say it is US policy, Israel has in fact been engaged in a slow genocide against the Palestinian people over 76 years of occupation that started with the Nakba in 1948. In Gaza, this constituted squeezing the economic life out of the territory with a 17-year-old land, sea, and air blockade that stopped the free movement of goods and people to and from Gaza. In the West Bank, it has taken the form of never-ending expansionist settlement projects that prevent the emergence of a Palestinian state while squeezing available living space for the Palestinian native population. And we are under constant attack by armed and unhinged settlers, terrorists, under the protection of the Israeli military, like we saw just this week in Limghayr and many other villages scattered around the West Bank. This is all overseen by twin legal systems that grant Israeli living illegally in occupied territory more rights than Palestinians living on their own land. This is what the US government is offering its ironclad support for. Israel's genocide in Gaza has shown that the US is willing to support Israel regardless of its actions, whether it is imposing a famine on 2.3 million people, whether it is killing 14,500 children, or whether it is bombing neighboring countries. International law, international human rights law, and simple standards of common decency no longer apply. But Israel's genocide in Gaza has also shown that the US administration is increasingly isolated. Not just because of the unanimous consensus of the UN, of international human rights groups, of humanitarian agencies, of journalist groups, of medical associations, education unions, etc., over the illegality of Israel's actions. Nor is it the fact that Israel is officially on trial at the International Court of Justice for the crime of genocide. It comes most visibly from the millions of ordinary people who have taken to the streets in protest across the world. It comes from you and in the US itself. We know from polling that even as US officials insist they see no evidence that Israel is breaking international law, let alone committing genocide, the US public disagrees. A majority believe Israel is committing genocide, including a large majority of Democrat voters. Genocide, mind you, not just breaking international law. There is, in other words, widespread American discontent. It has been met with attempts to silence dissent, especially on US campuses, where accusations of anti-Semitism are being wielded to stifle free speech, the academic freedom, prevent protests, to cancel debates. The political echelons' blind support for Israel is therefore translating into the repression of America's democratic rights. How has it come to this? How is that vested interests have been allowed to subjugate American values? How did even Harvard fall prey to this atmosphere? Israel has traditionally been a bipartisan issue in America and may well be a theological issue to some evangelicals, but it no longer enjoys unchallenged support among the wider public, and for good reason. Israel is an existential threat to the Palestinian people. Israel is the main cause of instability in the wider Middle East region, and it has revealed itself as a threat to the rules-based global order, to our humanity. Israeli exceptionalism is threatening the edifice of international law. The normalization of mass murder, mass destruction, and mass displacement is undermining the fundamental values of international humanitarian law. It's undermining our humanity. It is leaving deep scars. And the lack of accountability is making a mockery of international justice and of Israel's allies. Israel is corrupting the world and corrupting the US. And this is becoming clearer with every passing day, with every child murdered, every aid worker slain, every school demolished, every hospital bombed, and every home destroyed. But there is growing rejection of this behavior across the globe. It is an apartheid South Africa moment. And change will come from the grassroots. Change will come from you. From ordinary people taking to the streets in extraordinary numbers to protest their own government's inactivity in the face of such brazen criminality. And that is a movement that is uniting the world with one voice and is becoming unstoppable, a force that will go all the way for Palestinian liberation and return, for the equal implementation of international law via sanctions and arms embargo, and for the sake of peace and justice. Even in these dark moments in Palestinian history, there is hope, my friends. There is hope that reason will overcome irrational bias. There is hope because our people never give up. There is hope because of the millions of people around the world who stood up against Israel's genocide in Gaza. There is hope that humanity will once again unite to condemn genocide, the vilest of crimes, and vow once again that we will never repeat such horror, and this time mean it for everyone. Thank you.